What if everything you thought Jesus said about money was only half the story? What if the image of a poor, sandal-wearing preacher who told people to give everything away is actually more complex, and far more radical, than anyone dared to preach in Sunday school? Because the truth is, Jesus didn't just talk about money. He exposed it. He dismantled it. And for the powerful, that made him dangerous. In the ancient world, wealth was everything. It meant power, respect, survival. The Roman Empire was built on vast fortunes extracted from the backs of the poor. Religious leaders wore fine robes, sat in privileged seats, and collected tithes from the people while claiming divine approval. Into this world stepped a man who would do the unthinkable, call it all out. But he didn't lead an army. He didn't storm the palaces. He used words. Stories. Simple parables that cracked open people's illusions like thunder. When Jesus spoke about wealth, he didn't say, "Be careful with money." He said things like, "Woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort." He called the rich blind. He said a camel would sooner squeeze through the eye of a needle than a rich man would enter the kingdom of God. Those aren't warnings. Those are indictments. And the people who heard them knew it. Jesus wasn't subtle when he overturned the tables in the temple. He was targeting the financial heart of the religious system. Those tables weren't just furniture, they were symbols of a corrupted alliance between religion and profit. The temple had become a marketplace. The house of God had become a bank. And Jesus didn't whisper his disapproval. He made a whip. He drove out the money changers in fury. This wasn't passive resistance. This was open confrontation. But what's shocking isn't just what he did, it's what he told others to do. Sell everything you own and give it to the poor. Not donate a percentage. Not give out of excess. Everything. Radical? Yes. Symbolic? Maybe. But Jesus wasn't vague. To the rich young ruler, he didn't offer a loophole. He offered a choice: keep your wealth or follow me. You can't do both, and yet, this wasn't just about punishment. There was deep logic behind his teachings. Jesus knew money wasn't neutral. It was spiritual. It had a gravity, a pull, a seductive force. He said, you cannot serve both God and money. Not because he wanted people to be broke, but because he knew money had the power to enslave the soul. He spoke of a man who stored up grain in bigger and bigger barns, thinking he'd finally achieved security. But that very night, his life was taken from him. All his riches, worthless. That parable wasn't just a cautionary tale. It was a warning to anyone who built their life on the illusion of control through wealth. Because wealth lies. It tells you you're safe. It tells you you're better. And Jesus shattered that illusion, but the story goes deeper. Many of Jesus's followers were not just poor, they were economically crushed. Farmers taxed into oblivion. Fishermen working for foreign overlords. Widows with nothing. These weren't just his audience. They were his people. And when he said blessed are the poor, he meant it. He wasn't being poetic. He was saying that heaven's values flipped the world's values upside down. That in God's kingdom, the last would be first, and yet, people have twisted his message for centuries. Prosperity preachers today tell millions that Jesus wants you to be rich. That faith brings financial blessing. But Jesus never said that. In fact, he said the opposite. He warned that the pursuit of wealth would choke your soul, like thorns in a field. He called it a root of all kinds of evil. And still, people sit in million-dollar churches, drive luxury cars, and speak his name, while the poor sleep outside. It wasn't just the rich he confronted. He also told the comfortable, the complacent, and the indifferent that their time was running out. In the story of the rich man and Lazarus, a beggar lies at the rich man's gate. When they die, their fates reverse. Lazarus is carried to peace. The rich man, torment. And the gap between them, Jesus says, cannot be crossed. The implication is clear: it's not enough to be wealthy and charitable. You have to see the suffering around you and act, before it's too late, and maybe that's the scariest part. Jesus didn't just challenge your bank account. He challenged your heart. He asked, "What do you treasure?" Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If your heart is in your investments, your house, your status, you might lose everything and not even notice your soul is gone. Even his own disciples struggled with this. When he said it was hard for the rich to enter heaven, they were shocked. Why? Because even they believed wealth meant favor. But Jesus flipped that idea. He said it's the broken, the meek, the persecuted, the poor in spirit who are blessed. Not because they suffer, but because they are free from the illusion that money can save them. And what about Judas? The man who betrayed him, for silver. 30 pieces. Money didn't just corrupt empires. It entered the inner circle. It bought betrayal. And afterward, Judas tried to return the coins, tried to undo the damage, but it was too late. The temple priests wouldn't even take the money back. It was blood money. Money that revealed what a man was truly willing to trade for comfort, security, and power. So what does this mean today? In a world obsessed with status, luxury, and accumulation, Jesus' words are more radical than ever. He's not telling you to feel guilty for having a job or saving for the future. He's asking you something deeper: do you own your wealth, or does your wealth own you? Could you give it up, right now, if you had to? If the answer is no, then maybe you're not as free as you think, and here's the twist. Jesus wasn't against provision. He fed the hungry. He celebrated abundance when it was shared. But he never hoarded. He never exploited. His power came from giving, not taking. And in that, he revealed a secret most people still ignore: true wealth is not what you keep. It's what you give away. That's the paradox. That's the revolution. That's the reason his message scared kings and comforted beggars. Because he wasn't selling a religion. He was offering liberation from the lies we build our lives on. He told people to become like children. Why? Because children don't obsess over bank accounts. They don't measure worth by material things. They trust. They live in the moment. They love freely. And maybe that's why Jesus said the kingdom belongs to them, because they haven't yet been corrupted by the chase for more. And that chase, it's what drives entire systems. Governments, corporations, even churches. Always chasing more. But more is never enough. And that's why Jesus called people to a different economy. Not based on interest rates or gold or GDP. But on love. Mercy. Generosity. He told a story of a master who paid all his workers the same wage, whether they worked all day or just 1 hour. And people were furious. It wasn't fair. But Jesus wasn't preaching fairness. He was revealing a world where grace was the currency, and generosity was the standard. And still, people clung to their coins. One day, he watched as people gave offerings at the temple. The rich gave large sums, and everyone noticed. But then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 tiny coins. Practically worthless. Yet Jesus said she gave more than anyone else, because she gave all she had. Not out of abundance, but out of faith. Out of love. She didn't hold back. She trusted. Contrast that with the Pharisees. Religious leaders who made a show of wealth and piety. Jesus called them whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but full of death inside. They tithed their spices but neglected justice. They prayed loudly but ignored the suffering. They loved the upper seats but despised the poor. Jesus didn't hold back. He exposed them. Because for him, wealth without compassion was rot, and that brings us to the heart of it all. Jesus wasn't trying to destroy wealth. He was trying to redeem it. Reorient it. To take something that had become a god, and remind people there is only one God. And he doesn't need your riches. He needs your heart. That's why he told people to store up treasures in heaven. Not as a metaphor, but as a reality. Because generosity changes the world. It breaks cycles. It frees people. Including the giver. There's a reason early Christians shared everything in common. They weren't forced. They weren't coerced. They were free. And that freedom turned the world upside down. The Roman Empire couldn't understand it. Because these people didn't just talk about love, they lived it. They sold their land. They gave to the poor. They met each other's needs. Not out of duty, but out of joy, and the same power that terrified empires still exists. The power of people who are not owned by what they own. The power of those who give instead of grasp. Because money is a tool. And Jesus knew that tools can either build or destroy. It depends on who's holding them, and what they serve. So if Jesus were here today, walking past the skyscrapers, the megamalls, the financial districts, what would he say? Would he flip tables again? Would he call out the CEOs and pastors and politicians who live in luxury while millions starve? Or would he sit quietly with the homeless, the outcasts, the debt-crushed single mother, and tell them, you are not forgotten. You are not less, because the real scandal of Jesus wasn't just what he said about money, it was who he spent time with. The poor. The prostitutes. The tax collectors. The very people society said were worthless. He didn't just preach to them. He valued them. He restored their dignity. He made them the heroes of his stories. And when you look at his crucifixion, it wasn't just a religious execution. It was a political act. The powers of wealth and empire crushed him. Why? Because he threatened the status quo. He challenged the illusion that power could be bought and sold. That security came from the sword or the coin. He showed a different kind of power. The power of sacrifice. The power of truth. The power of love that doesn't seek to gain, but to give, and maybe that's why his message still echoes. Because deep down, people know that wealth without purpose is empty. That comfort without compassion is poison. That life is more than consumption. More than profit. And that a poor man from Nazareth might just have spoken the richest truth the world has ever known. So the next time you hear someone say that Jesus wants you to be rich, remember this. He didn't die to pad your wallet. He died to free your soul. And that freedom starts not when you gain more, but when you let go.